It was an unusually quiet morning in the small town of Hillview, with the sun peeking through the clouds as it began its slow ascent in the sky. In the bustling streets, cars whizzed past, people went about their business, and everything seemed to be running smoothly. But then, an unexpected scene unfolded in front of the local hospital that would change the course of a man's life, and the life of a very special dog. The sound of an ambulance's siren cut through the air, its red and blue lights flashing brightly against the otherwise serene morning. The ambulance weaved its way through the traffic, carrying a patient who was in dire need of urgent medical attention. But as it reached the intersection near the hospital, something incredible happened that brought the traffic to a halt and the medics to a standstill. A dog, an unremarkable brown and white mixed breed, suddenly appeared from an alley and ran directly into the path of the speeding ambulance. The driver slammed on the brakes, screeching to a halt just inches away from the dog, who stood firm in the middle of the street. For a few moments, the dog didn't move, but the ambulance crew could see its eyes were locked on them with a strange intensity. The paramedics inside exchanged confused looks. Why would a dog, of all things, block their path at such a critical time? This was no ordinary dog. It had a calm, almost deliberate energy about it, like it knew exactly what it was doing. The driver honked the horn, trying to get the dog to move, but it didn't budge. The medics yelled out the window, trying to coax the animal out of the way, but it was as though the dog couldn't hear them. Then, something remarkable happened. The dog slowly turned its head to the side, looking in the direction of the hospital as if to say, "This way." And then, with a slow, steady movement, it began walking toward the front of the ambulance, its eyes still firmly locked on the driver. The dog didn't run or dart. It moved with purpose, making the paramedics even more intrigued. "What's going on?" one of the medics asked. "It's like it's guiding us." The paramedic sitting next to the driver motioned toward the hospital entrance. "Let's follow it. Maybe it knows something we don't." Reluctantly, the driver shifted the gears, and the ambulance followed the dog's path. As it led them around the block toward the back of the hospital, the dog kept a steady pace, its tail slightly raised but not wagging, as if it was fully aware of its important role in this bizarre situation. They followed the dog for a few more blocks until it reached a small, almost hidden gate on the side of the hospital's property. The dog stopped just before the entrance and turned to look at the ambulance as if giving its final approval. The medics, now thoroughly puzzled, pulled into the parking lot and stopped. The dog, without hesitation, walked directly to the back of the building, and with one final glance at the ambulance, it disappeared into the distance, leaving the paramedics standing in stunned silence. "What in the world just happened?" one of them muttered. The medics knew they couldn't afford to waste any more time, so they quickly grabbed their gear and rushed into the hospital. But as they entered the emergency room, the situation inside was far from what they had expected. The patient they had rushed in with was an elderly man, pale and barely conscious. His name was Henry Mitchell, a man known by many in the town for his years of hard work and his quiet, kind demeanor. But what struck the medics was the way his eyes seemed to flicker when they entered the room. As the medics worked to stabilize him, they heard something that made their hearts stop. A nurse looked up and muttered, "That dog, it was here yesterday. It's been coming to Henry every day for the last month." It wasn't until they looked back at Henry's condition that they realized the true reason behind the dog's actions. The dog wasn't just blocking the ambulance, it had led them to where they were needed most. The reason behind this unbelievable act was about to unfold in a way none of them had expected, and the story of Henry Mitchell and his loyal canine companion was about to touch every heart in town. As the medics worked frantically to stabilize Henry Mitchell in the emergency room, there was an overwhelming sense of urgency in the air. The elderly man's vitals were weak, and he had barely survived the trip to the hospital. Yet, his body seemed to fight against the inevitable, and his hand, though trembling, reached out weakly toward the nurse standing by his side. "Nurse, can you check the chart?" The lead medic, Sarah, asked, her voice tense. "We need a full history. Any family nearby?" But the nurse just shook her head. "His daughter was supposed to visit today, but she hasn't arrived yet." "Is the dog still here?" Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued by the mention of the dog earlier. The nurse hesitated, her brow furrowing. "Actually, I thought I saw him again. The dog, I mean. But it ran off after Henry was brought in." Sarah's heart sank. There was something unexplainable about the connection between Henry and the dog. A relationship that had somehow led the ambulance to the back of the hospital. The medics had all thought it was just a strange coincidence. But now, in the quiet of the emergency room, a deeper sense of purpose seemed to hover in the air. Suddenly, Henry's eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, he locked eyes with Sarah. His voice was weak, but his words cut through the noise of the bustling hospital. "The dog," Henry whispered. "He's always been here. Always by my side." Sarah leaned in closer. "What do you mean, Henry? Who is the dog?" Henry's eyes shimmered with tears, and a faint smile flickered across his lips. "He saved me, you know. My best friend, my dog." Sarah paused, confused. "Saved you? How?" Henry's breathing slowed, and he seemed to struggle with the words. "When my wife passed away, I was lost. The dog found me. He never left my side. Kept me going. Kept me alive." The room was silent for a moment as Sarah absorbed the weight of Henry's words. She had assumed the dog was just another stray or companion, a pet that had somehow found its way to him. But now, hearing Henry speak of the dog with such reverence, she realized there was more to the story than she could have imagined. Before Sarah could ask another question, Henry's voice grew even weaker. "He's waiting for me." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. She glanced toward the door, wondering if the dog was still nearby. But before she could get an answer, the door to the room creaked open, and the dog appeared. The same brown and white mixed breed that had blocked the ambulance earlier. He stood in the doorway, his eyes locked on Henry's. Without a word, the dog slowly padded into the room, walking to Henry's bedside. There was a quiet serenity in the way the dog moved. He wasn't just there as a pet, he was there with purpose. Henry, too weak to speak any longer, reached out a trembling hand. The dog, with great tenderness, nudged his face into Henry's hand, resting there as if they shared a quiet understanding. Sarah watched, her heart heavy with emotion. The bond between them was undeniable. Suddenly, Henry's monitor beeped louder. His heart rate began to slow, and his breathing became more shallow. "Is he?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. But before she could finish her sentence, Henry's hand tightened around the dog's fur. A final, peaceful sigh escaped Henry's lips. The dog gave one last, soft whine, nuzzling into Henry's side. His tail wagged gently, almost in mourning. And then, as if it had fulfilled its purpose, the dog slowly rose to its feet walked toward the door, and paused, turning back to look at Henry one final time. As the dog stood in the doorway, its gaze lingered on Henry one last time, the bond between them clear and undeniable. Nathaniel, who had been standing quietly in the corner, watched in stunned silence. He had witnessed countless moments of hope and despair in his life, but nothing like this. The room was heavy with emotion, an unspoken understanding between the dog and Henry, one that only they shared. The dog hesitated for just a moment, before slowly turning and walking out of the room, its paws soft against the hospital floor. It didn't look back, but it didn't need to. The mission was complete. The bond had been sealed. Sarah, still in shock, looked at Henry's lifeless body. His hand, still resting on the spot where the dog had been, had loosened. The room felt emptier now. She stepped forward, placing her hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight of the moment. The man had lived a full life, but it seemed his journey had been intertwined with the dog's until the very end. Nathaniel moved closer to Sarah, his voice barely a whisper. "What now?" he asked, not sure if he was speaking to her or to the room itself. He could still hear the soft patting of the dog's paws as it walked away down the hallway, its purpose fulfilled. "I think," Sarah began, her voice catching, "I think the dog was more than just a pet. He was Henry's reason to live, and now he's gone. With Henry." A quiet tear fell from her eye, a tear that seemed to carry all the sorrow and love that Henry and the dog had shared. Nathaniel nodded, his heart heavy but full of understanding. Some bonds transcended time, even life itself. As they watched the dog disappear into the hospital corridors, it was clear that this story, this act of love and loyalty, would stay with them forever. The world had witnessed something remarkable. A dog who, with its silent love, had guided its owner to the peace he deserved.